Hi, and welcome to the Jimmy and Lou Show, episode number 69. This is your presenter, Jimmy and Lou's, and today I wanted to talk about the Bitcoin P2P protocol. What is the Bitcoin P2P protocol? Well, it's a separate part to the what are called the Bitcoin rules or the Bitcoin consensus rules, or what people call the Bitcoin protocol. When you hear people speaking about a set in stone protocol, they're generally talking about things such as the scripting language, the layout of a block, how the transactions are ordered, the the thing where miners get initially a reward of 50 Bitcoin per block, and then it goes to 25. Blocks take 10 minutes on average. All these sorts of things are the consensus rules and are part of what people call the Bitcoin protocol, which leads to the set in stone protocol. Now we can look at Bitcoin as in Bitcoin SV. Also, we can use as a reference BTC, because I see Bitcoin as in Bitcoin SV. We're striving apparently in 2020 to get a set in stone protocol, which means that it'll be really useful for companies just to be able to build on top of Bitcoin, and they know they won't have to go back and fix things and upgrade things and change things. If you want to see an example of something that's not a set in stone protocol or not heading in that direction, look at Bcash, where they're changing things all the time, where there is no real guarantee of compatibility for some things in the future, and companies who have invested and built something, they might have to go back and change it. And if you want to look at a set in stone protocol, even though officially it's not, a good example actually is BTC. Why? Because I believe that they're afraid to change their protocol, because they realize doing so might just probably is guaranteed to cause a fork and to have quite a bit of miner power behind that fork, because that fork will have a keen interest to try and take control of the ticker symbol BTC and the name Bitcoin. Obviously, the same thing would happen, I guess, what happened with Bitcoin, as in BSV, when we split from Bcash, as in the ticker symbol was decided very quickly by largely unfair means, more by proof of social media than by anything, and more by connections and stuff. Roger Ver, his friends at Kraken, the people at CoinDance, which is a very, very skewed site. That guy, the guy who runs CoinDance, is a 100% Bcasher. So these sorts of things, such as ticker symbols and stuff, are not decided by Nakamoto consensus. We've already seen that. But anyway, it would probably happen anyway. There would be some sort of fork just to take advantage of the fact that they could say, hey, we're the original Bitcoin. And if there isn't such a fork, we, as in Bitcoin SV, should do it, because it's kind of like a weapon, a thing that we could weaponize. This is when they say that we're the original Bitcoin and our nodes from 2016 and still run and all this stuff. If they ever did any sort of hard fork, that wouldn't happen. And the last notable change they did really was SegWit, which was a soft fork, which, maybe I should do a show about SegWit sometime, explain exactly why there's so many lies in the narratives about SegWit, but that's something for another time. But anyway, what I will say about BTC is you might have the impression that these blockstream neckbeards are very lazy. They do a lot of coding. What do? They do stuff such as they're changing the Bitcoin P2P protocol. Quite often, it's something that changes every release of their node software, their Bitcoin Core node software. And basically, you can imagine you could run Bitcoin, especially BTC, with small blocks. You could do it by carrier pigeon. So you could mine your block and find it, and you could send out a load of pigeons with your block on a pen drive or whatever, to other miners, receive the pigeons, put them into their computer, into their node. The block, they validate the block, and that's the block they start building on. So it really is, it's an independent part of Bitcoin. It's just the part that moves the blocks around, that moves the transactions around, that announces things. That is the Bitcoin P2P protocol. And that can, should, and will always be changed. So there could be a situation in the future where, especially on Bitcoin, as in BSV, because we're going to be making so many changes to this protocol, I imagine. So there could come a time where, so we had some new, I'll explain later some of the common messages and stuff, but say we had some new features, new ways of passing around blocks. As we get bigger blocks, we're going to have to do smart things, more efficient things, because remember the existing protocol right now has been built for 1 megabyte blocks basically. So it could become a time in the future where we implement new messages, and for a certain amount of time, maybe a few years, depending on whether we're speaking to an old node or a new node, because the nodes know the version of the other node, they know they're speaking to an older node or a newer node. Both nodes running exactly the same Bitcoin protocol, the same set-in-stone protocol, but just a different version of the P2P protocol. So when it connects to a new node, it could send a new message, more efficient, I don't know, for example, to send a block or to receive a block. And when it connects to an older node, it can do it the old-fashioned way, which is how it does it now, I guess. But there could come a point in the future where they could say, okay, we're getting rid of all this legacy code. So what that would mean is there would be a forced upgrade, as in you would have to update your node software to run the latest version. But that would not be a hard fork, it wouldn't be a soft fork. What it would actually do if you didn't upgrade your node software is, well, I guess it could cause a fork, because if a few other miners didn't either, but the thing is, this sort of thing would be monitored, and miners, and you know, they wouldn't do this until they were sure that all miners were running a later version anyway. And there wouldn't be no reason not to, because obviously with a later node software, it's not, you know, everything's just going to be more efficient anyway, whether it's the speed of the validation, whether it's the speed of propagating blocks. You're not going to make your software worse. So miners, maybe they won't always be on the latest beta version, but they'll probably be on the latest release version. So this is just an example. Anyway, so how does the Bitcoin protocol, P2P protocol work? Well, it connects using a TCP IP connection rather than UDP. That could change. UDP, for those who know a bit about networking, is more efficient, but you have to do more work to use it, because it doesn't include checksums. It doesn't validate that what has been sent is what is received by the other side. So you have to implement your own checksum and all this stuff, which has a cost in making it more complicated, but it's faster. You can get more use of your bandwidth, and there's all sorts of things, quite complicated things that happen when you've got long distances of cables, long distances of connections. You've got slow connections and fast connections and all these sorts of things. UDP, if it's programmed well, is a lot more efficient to move data around than TCP is. That's why, for example, on BitTorrent uses UDP. But anyway, right now, Bitcoin and BTC and Bcash and all the others, they use TCP. That includes, as part of TCP, one of the guarantees is that when you send data, it's received in the order that it was sent in, which is something else that doesn't happen in UDP, and that whatever you send, as long as it gets to the destination, it is what you sent. It's not changed, it's not corrupted, it's exactly as sent. More or less, because there is a checksum, there is a slight possibilities that things can be damaged. So this is why, on top of that, we do checksum in Bitcoin anyway. So what is how does a P2P protocol work? Well, you've got to imagine that and remember that Bitcoin is decentralized. So the first thing is there's no, it's not like a client-server model. If it was a client-server model, you would connect to a server or one of a series of specific servers, federated servers, saying, you know, what is the latest block? Download me this block. Download me the, you know, all of the blocks, or I want to see these transactions, or send all transactions to me. That's how it would work, and you'd be talking to a server. But obviously, P2P, technically you are both a client and a server, and there is no official server. So what happens? Well, if you look at the BTC source code, there's all sorts of servers, private servers owned by people like Luke Dasher, or Luke Dash Jr., I'm not sure how you say his name, Peter Todd, a few other people, the trusted developers, shall we say, and it connects to the DNS servers that these guys run. And from there, it gets a list of initial peers. Now, on the Bitcoin SV side, Bitcoin, it does something similar, but it connects to like N-Chain, it connects to a few other companies in the space who have provided servers just to be independent, because it would be dangerous to have it just with N-Chain, for instance, because say that would make N-Chain an attack point. So if N-Chain were attacked, hackers could change these initial seeding servers, and your node in theory could never find a real valid chain. But I'll explain that anyway, what you should do once you've synced up, and it's pretty obvious. So anyway, what happens next? Well, you get this list of initial IPs, and then your node, it does it all with time delays, because you don't want to be connecting to a load of IPs at the same time, because it's just going to be bad for your traffic. So it connects to a few of them, time delays, getting a list of nodes, and then that list of nodes, it like collates them into one list, removing the duplicates, and those lists are IPv6 addresses or IPv4 addresses. Internally, they're all stored as IPv6. The IPv4 is converted into a special mapping address. And what happens is, it then goes and just, I've not really looked at the code to be honest, but I imagine it kind of like tries to not connect to addresses that are on the similar subnet. So it probably, you know, if there's an IP address that starts with a 1, and there's an IP address that starts with 200, it'll probably choose them two, rather than going sequentially with one, you know, with IPs that are close to each other. I mean, but for sure it does it randomly. The idea being that the best way to build some sort of network initially, especially when you're trying to find new nodes, is to connect randomly and have random people connect to you. So what happens? The node, I think that you're limited to. I can't remember if it's 8 or 16. I think it's 16. I say 16, it's probably going to be 8. It's 8 or 16. I'm doing this ad hoc. It's 8 or 16 outgoing connections. That's the limit in the software. It's not a limit in the protocol, because of course nobody knows how many connections you have, but that's how the software is designed. So, and of course, you can have as many incoming connections as possible. So what happens is, say you're connected to IP address 1.2.3.4 on port 883, you will open up a TCP IP connection. So it'll be the same thing as a telnet connection, really, or any sort of standard socket. And the first thing it does, you've got to remember that all the network messages, because that's how a P2P network works, or any sort of client server thing, anything that communicates, generally has a protocol of messages. So the most basic message in Bitcoin, there's two, but we'll get into the first one first. first one it has to send. If it doesn't send this, if you receive a new connection or you make a new connection, if this doesn't happen, you're deemed to be an attacker. You're deemed to be sending bad traffic. You'll get IP banned for 24 hours. What you need to send is what's called a version message. Now your version message, it holds the network magic bytes. Always, every message has that, which are 4 bytes, which identify whether it's the main net, whether it's the test net, whether it's reg test, or whether it's scaling network, STN, scaling test network. And you can look at the source code and see these bytes. I can't remember what they are. I think the live starts with FE. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. 4 bytes, and then you have the text of the message, which I believe is 12 bytes, padded with zeros, so it always occupies 12 bytes. And the most basic one is version in all capitals. And like I said, if you don't send that first, then you're going to get kicked. Or if somebody connects to you and doesn't send you that version thing first, you should kick them. So the version, it contains quite a bit of information. It contains, it tells the what version of the client you're running. It says a few things like if you're willing to receive transactions at all. So that means it. Also, if you're interested in just in receiving blocks. So you might not be interested in receiving blocks, because sometimes once you are connected, once this process has taken place, when a block's found, sometimes a node will just send them out to every single connection that it thinks wants blocks, because it has to propagate as quickly as possible. Now, if you're an SPV wallet, for instance, you don't want to receive a block. You're only interested in block headers. So then you would receive an announcement that there's a new block header out there, and then you can go and do whatever you want to do with the block. So it's flags basically of identifying what sort of thing that your node is, what sort of traffic that it wants. And just to advise here, because you've got to remember, this is decentralized P2P. Nobody has to play by the rules. Every attack can take place over this protocol. So clients have to kind of like check that whatever clients say they're doing, they are doing. And if they are misbehaving, it's your responsibility to kick them and not share their IP with others. So bad actors from the network are quickly removed. Nobody can steal bitcoins. Nobody can mine fake blocks or anything. But potentially what could happen is it happened on Bitcoin XT back in 2014, 15. I can't remember the year now. Too much history. Where they forked the Bitcoin protocol, the Bitcoin client, had it set to change the block size to 2 megabytes. They didn't implement that yet. They just wanted to see and get usage of this node, this alternative version, get usage of it to see, where the consensus stood. And what happened was, people say it was Blockstream, people running these nodes were DDoSed. They were attacked by lots and lots and lots of junk traffic designed to make the nodes unusable, to make it so that there was so much crap traffic being received that nobody else could connect to them and they couldn't connect to anybody else. And they actually took down some rural ISPs doing that, just by hitting them with so much traffic. So that's what happened there. So anyway, yeah. So this version thing, this version message, you send it to IP address 1.2.3.4 because it happens to be the first one that you're going to connect to. It's randomly chosen that address. This is the first time you've ever started the Bitcoin node. And the reply you have to get is a version message from the node you're connecting to. Anything else received, you cut the connection because it's bad traffic. It's corrupt, or it's an attack, or whatever. That version message will be exactly the same as yours, other than it will be telling you what they want to receive, and what they can send to you. because obviously if you're an SPV wallet, you cannot send anybody full blocks. And also it will have their version, so immediately you know, say for example, if we'll just invent version numbers. Say for example, if you're connecting with version 10 and and you've connected to this node and they're running on version 9, you know that the best way you can speak to them is by using version 9 of the protocol. So if you're version 10, you can use commands and stuff that was implemented in versions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but not 9. Sorry, and 9 because they're version 9, but you cannot use stuff implemented in version 10. Now, likewise, you could connect to another node and that could be running version 11, so they know to use anything up to version 10 because you speak version 10. And obviously, if you both send a version message to each other and you're both version 10, then that's what you speak, obviously. But just so that nodes running future versions can speak older versions of the protocol. And this is how, basically, so this is how, you might have heard this quite a few times, that I can't remember what version number it is. I think it's version 0.14 or 0.13 of Bitcoin, which doesn't have SegWit support. It can still talk with other nodes now, of BTC side. It can still talk with new nodes now. That's because they're speaking, the newer nodes are speaking the old language, shall we say. So, this goes back to what I said earlier about there could be a forced upgrade because they might remove a lot of this old stuff, because every single time you add support for speaking to an older version, the code just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more complicated. And obviously right now, if you look, we're not going to speak in any version of the protocol before December 2018, because we didn't even exist then as BSV, as Bitcoin SV node software. So anyway, so you send a version, they send a version, and then they have to send after that, because remember, you've connected to them. As soon as they send their version, they have to send what's called a VERACK, VERACK. That means version acknowledgement. And then what you have to do, because you've received their version, is you send a VERACK as well, which means that you've acknowledged that you've received their version. So that is the handshake over. You've connected, you've communicated with them, telling them who you are. They've communicated back to you, telling them who they are and what they support, and you told them what you support, both to send and what you want to receive, and then they've done the same thing. So your node software has made some sort of internal memory of exactly what it expects from this node, what version it has to speak, etc. And that's it. Now, if you don't communicate with this node anymore, you keep the connection stays open, what will happen, or what is expected to happen, because remember, there are no rules here. These are just like the rules that should happen. You could always have somebody writing a misbehaving node on purpose, or somebody writing an experimental node with bugs. So you have to really take care of these things if you're trying to write your own node. What happens is, after 10 minutes of not receiving any traffic, that node should close the connection. If it hasn't spoken to you after 10 minutes, it should close the connection. Now, you can imagine a scenario where maybe you've connected to a new node just after a block has been mined that you've already received. So you say hello, version, and then I forgot. Also in the version, what it tells you is it tells you the latest block number as a number, and also the hash of that block, which we'll come back to later. The initial synchronization, which I'll probably do in part 2 of this talk. So yeah, you know what the block number is, and you know the hash. So when you do the version, so imagine you could have just connected to a node. You've seen that, oh, the latest block this node's got is the one that I already have, because maybe you're synced to the chain, and you're sitting there, and say that a block, because we all know blocks are supposed to be on average every 10 minutes, but we've all seen sometimes it can take 20 minutes, sometimes it can take half an hour, sometimes it can take an hour, 2 hours, or even sometimes 3 hours for a block. It's a thing called variance. So what happens? Well, if you did nothing, after 10 minutes, you would disconnect from that node, or well, he would disconnect from you, and your client would disconnect as well. If it was a well-being client, to close the connection at both ends, or and free that connection up so you can go and make another one. And all the other clients you're connected to would do the same thing. So how would you prevent that? Well, what you do is you send, which is really is the simplest message, but you can't send this until you've done what's called the version handshake, is you send what's called a ping. And it's not the same as an actual ping on a TCP/IP protocol. It's just a message really that says ping, and just like version, the expected response is a verac. With a ping, the expected response is a pong. So if you send out your ping, I'm not sure on the exact time requirements, but I think you've got like a minute to receive a pong. And if you haven't received a pong in a minute, then you assume that that connection's dead. So then you would actually close the connection, free up the resources used for that connection, and go and look into your queue of who you should be connecting to and go and connect to somebody else. But if you received a pong, you would keep the connection open, because this could be a case where after 10 minutes a block still hasn't been found. So especially if you're an SPV wallet and you're not receiving any transactions, you're not going to be receiving any traffic. So ping pong is a nice way to keep the connection open, to say, look, I'm here, are you there? Yeah, okay, let's keep the connection open, let's carry on. And eventually what will happen is you'll receive a message telling you that there's either a new block or a new block header. And depending on who you are, what sort of node you are, whether you want full blocks, whether you just want headers, or whether you want to have any announcements at all sent to you, will depend on what happens. You'll receive either a block header, which is very small, it's like 80 bytes, and that'll give you enough information to know that a new block has been made. This is the hash of the block, and then from there you can do what you want to do. You can download the whole block. You can find transactions on the block. You will be able to look at Merkle paths and stuff once that is set up, which is something else we'll get into in another talk. So yeah, I've covered version, verac, ping and pong. Let's move on to fees. Now, let's first move on to nodes. I can't remember the command. I think it's nodes or node. I think it's node or nodes. So what happens is, once you've done it, you remember I said you connect to the servers of Nchain and CoinGeek and a few other companies and people, or on BTC you're connecting to Luke Dash Jr., Peter Todd, just to get the initial seed list. But once you've got that, you connect to a few nodes in that seed list. Some of them might not work anymore, or they might be busy or overloaded, but you should get connected to a few of them. There are all sorts of fallback mechanisms if none of those lists work, and there are ways it should, unless you're being attacked, it should find one node. And it only has to find really one valid node that is not a bad actor. And if it finds one valid node that is not a bad actor, what that node will have internally is it keeps, I believe it's 1,000 is the limit. It keeps a list of 1,000 of, we'll say, its favorite nodes. So any node that it's banned, it will keep it in its ban list, which stays for 24 hours, because it would be unfair to ban a node forever. But certainly if you receive a block propagation, which you believe is a block, and you look at it and it's total fake, the hash is fake, it doesn't work, you can't validate the block, that could be an attack of somebody pretending to be a miner, sending valid blocks. You block that node. So that can happen even if a miner makes a mistake and somehow makes an invalid block, even if he puts the proof of work in there. Bang, that IP gets banned for 24 hours from that particular node. But if he sends a propagation to 100 nodes, the same crappy message, all 100 nodes are going to ban him. So that could really affect that miner for 24 hours anyway. So yeah, your node has a ban list, and that's a list of IPs that you've banned. And also there's a points scoring system. I don't want to get too much into this, but you could probably receive a bad transaction and you score it down a point, and when there's a certain limit reached, you ban the node, because some bad things can happen due to the nature of it being decentralized, and maybe there is some bugs somewhere in some clients, or maybe something happened in a bad order or something, and there's a kind of like point scoring thing, where unless you're doing something really bad, such as sending out a bad block, you won't get banned straight away. So anyway, yeah, you've got this ban list, and then you have what's called your nodes list, which is the nodes that you've connected to. And I think they're stored for, I'm trying to remember, I think it's 7 days or something. If it hasn't connected in 7 days, or you haven't connected to it in 7 days, it's assumed dead, lost, so it gets removed. If it's on the ban list, it doesn't get in your node list. I said the node list, internally it might be a lot bigger, but I believe externally it's a limit of 1,000, and I'm guessing they're kind of ordered, especially internally. So when you close your node software and you connect again, it's kind of like the nodes that you've had the best experience with, as in the nodes that have sent you traffic faster, the nodes that have sent the most blocks to you, the nodes that you seem to be closest to. Plus, also you've got to remember, it makes sense as well to connect to nodes far from you, because it makes sense from a security point of view, from a decentralized point of view, not to put all your eggs in one basket, shall we say. I mean, you need to have a look under the hood, and every client can be different. Every node software could be different. You really have to think about what makes sense. And I don't know how complicated they have gone on some of these details, but it certainly doesn't make sense to connect to everybody who's closest to you. It does make sense to connect to a lot of people close to you, but it also makes sense to connect to a few people far away from you as well. And Craig speaks about a small world network. That's the perfect connection. That's the perfect way that your nodes would naturally find themselves in if you was a miner. Now, so yeah, what happens, let's go back to what I was trying to say, is eventually after you've connected to a node, you're going to go and ask it for a list of its nodes, and it will send you a list of all the nodes that it's had, shall we say, good quality connections with, that it's not banned, and that it's at least communicated with and knows about. So it sends that up to 1,000 to your client, and so there you have it. So you came from having a bootstrap where you had a hard-coded list in the source code of some DNS service to connect to try and find some nodes, and now you've probably got a list of 1,000 nodes that are known working within the last 7 days. And actually internally it's more than 1,000, but you only send your best 1,000 or a random 1,000 to other nodes when they ask you for your nodes list. So every time you connect to different nodes, you ask them for their nodes list. And eventually, you have a massive list of nodes. Obviously, there's a lot of duplicates because they might be connected to the same node that you are. But, you remove those duplicates and you've got a list of nodes, good nodes. So imagine this happens at the start. What you rapidly do by looking at all these nodes is you send them versions, because remember, to connect to them, you have to send a version handshake. That tells you, at least in theory, remember you have to check it, but it tells you in theory anyway, and you'll soon be able to find out if they're lying or not, what block number they're on, and what the hash of that block is. So you can imagine your software does these connections, probably doesn't do 1,000 at first. I think it only connects to, say, half a dozen at the initial sync, when you initially install the node software and run it. So it connects to maybe a dozen, interrogates them all with the version, and it looks basically what's the highest number, and sees that the hash next to it, and then immediately what it can do is say, give me the block header to that node. And if that node responds with the block header, just by having the block header, without even downloading the block, you can see if a miner has spent money making that block header, because you can see that the hash resolves to the Merkle path. You don't really care about transactions at this point. You just want to see that this number really is this block number, and it really does have this hash. And the only way you can see if the hash is valid is by checking that it matches up with the difficulty level, which should be high, and should get higher every block normally, because that's what normally happens. Difficulty keeps increasing on any chain, whether it's BTC, Bcash, or Bitcoin. Anyway, so what then happens is you have to go and sync all of these blocks, and in theory you can start from Genesis, or you can start from well, no, you start from Genesis. I was thinking of Ethereum where you go backwards. You start from the Genesis, but you want to know which node seems to be on the latest block, because initially as well, when you connect, you can actually find yourself running a Bitcoin SV node. You could find yourself still connected to some Bcash and BTC nodes, which is interesting, because they are fundamentally speaking the same P2P protocol. They're running on the same port. Some of it could be errors, attacks. It could be other bad software passing nodes around, and something happens, but it's not always filtered on the node side. So the way you can see it really is if you look at a block explorer now, if you look at CoinDance now, for instance, you see that Bitcoin Cash is a few hundred blocks ahead of Bitcoin BSV, and BTC is quite a few thousand blocks behind. That's why the halving can happen first on Bcash, then a few days later it's going to happen on Bitcoin, and then I think it's like a month later it's going to happen on BTC. So yeah, where am I? Let me just think a second. Where was I? Yeah, so you get the latest block number, you check the block header that it's a valid proof of work for that block. So then you can say, okay, well, this node I'm interested in, because he seems to be the most advanced ahead. And I guess the node as well, it probably tries to find a few other nodes connected at the same block number, or around that number anyway, just as more verification that this might be the best block, as they call it, which is the chain tip you might hear. Now, of course, all the time that you start syncing from block 0, what happens next is you go from block 0. I think you download 2,000 of them at a time. You download the block headers, because the only block hash that is actually encoded in the protocol, in the software, is the Genesis block. Now, you might hear about checkpoints. You might hear about checkpoints in Bcash, which is another subject that should be tackled, but you might hear about checkpoints in BTC and Bitcoin SV. Yes, there are checkpoints, but they're just there. If you set an option, assume that blocks before this block number and before this hash are valid, what it will do is it won't bother replaying all the transactions in those blocks or validating them all. It'll just it'll take some speed up, some shortcuts basically, with those blocks before that checkpoint. Obviously you still have to sort out the UTXOs and stuff if you want to run a node, but it takes some shortcuts, shall we say. Or you can choose not to do that, and it will do a full total sync, checking absolutely everything, ignoring those checkpoints. So the only real block that is encoded in the node, unless you're speaking about Bcash, which is a complicated beast, total disgrace to Nakamoto consensus. The only block that is actually encoded in the node is obviously the Genesis block. So it starts with the Genesis block. It goes and gets, I think it's 2,000 or up to 2,000 block headers. And now it's doing this from quite a few clients, connected to quite a few other nodes doing it. It's not asking just one node for all of this information. Again, how it works is dependent on the version, dependent on exactly what node software you're using. Because imagine on, especially on Bcash, there is quite a few different versions. On BTC as well, not so many. Really on Bitcoin SV right now, we've got one node software, but that's only for now. We'll see what happens. So you go and get block headers, and you can check. Okay, so I'm on block 1. It says the previous hash is this. Is that the hash of block 0? Yes, it is. Okay, the previous hash is correct. The difficulty level, yep, it's correct. The hash, does that hash include that Merkle root and that timestamp and all the stuff that's a fundamental part of the security of a block, which is in the block header, is checked. You can say, okay, that block 1 is valid. Block 2 and previous block, is that the hash of block 1? Yes, it is. Okay, it looks like this is block 2, because the blocks, remember, they don't have any number internally. All they have is connections to hashes. The numbering is really something invented for us as humans to be able to follow. 0 is Genesis, 1 is block 1, 2, 3, 4. They really just connect by hash to a previous block. That's why it's called a chain, a blockchain. So it does that, gets 2,000 of them, and then keeps going, 2001 to 4,000, and keeps going and keeps going and keeps going and keeps going until it got to what the chain tip was. But of course, that's probably now changed, because it probably took you quite a few hours to get all these headers. So it keeps going, getting the newer headers all the way until it's got what it believes to be the latest header. Now, I've not actually looked at the code, but I imagine there's probably some sort of check there to check that the time of that block, because remember that the timestamp is stored in the header, but it's not an exact timestamp because it's hard to do decentralized time. But say there's probably a check to make sure that that time in the block header is, I don't know, within a week of what your computer thinks the current time is. Because your computer time could be wrong as well, of course. It could be wrong by a big number. If you've had a problem, anyone who's ever lost a battery, had a battery problem with the BIOS, has seen your clock can go back to 1990 or 2000 or 1970 or whatever. Of course, most systems won't boot, they'll have problems, but you could run into a state where your clock is totally skewed and invalid by months or years. And of course, checking that the date is around the current date is also a good way of checking that you really are pretty up to date with the blockchain. And now you've got to remember that in this chain of block headers, you've verified that the proof of work was done. You've verified that somebody has spent money making that proof of work, because the proof of work, the transactions are part of the block, and that's what makes big blocks. But really, whether you're speaking BTC, Bcash, or Bitcoin, the block header is the same size. I think it's 80 bytes. I think it's Craig, is it like 50 megabytes? I think to download the Bitcoin SV block headers right now, it's 50 megabytes. A little bit more on Bcash, maybe 51 megabytes. These are rough numbers. It changes obviously by the time you listen to this. But every block header is 80 bytes. So it's not a lot of data at all. And just with this simple list of data of these blocks, you can check the proof of work of every single block was done. So it's not just some numbers that somebody's invented. You don't need the transactions to see the proof of work was done. So that would be how, by downloading all these blocks from these untrusted, because remember, on the P2P protocol, everything is untrusted. Downloading all these block headers from all these untrusted nodes, you can finally get a chain of block headers where you can verify yourself that proof of work, as in money, has been spent making these blocks, or making these block headers, which is the first part of the block. So that means, that's why with a cell phone, all you need is the block headers. And of course, especially now everyone's speaking about SPV wallets and all this stuff. Now, of course, the nice thing is Core is very, this is why they do the whole bootstrapping thing and all this connecting. You could, in theory, make a cell phone SPV wallet, and you could largely have the initial blocks. So, you know, if I released my version of the software today, I'd probably look 200 blocks back and record the list of block headers, record all the data from the block headers, 80 bytes a block, from Genesis to a block 200 blocks ago, shall we say. Not the latest block, just in case there's a rollback or there's some problem. 200 is probably is a pretty safe number. There's much bigger problems to Bitcoin if we ever have to roll back 200 blocks. So I could go up to 200 blocks ago, send that out as a release to my software. So the client wouldn't have to start syncing from the Genesis block. It would start syncing from whatever the block was 200 blocks ago. So that would mean it'd be a much quicker downloading and using experience for the user, much less reliance on the P2P network to get all those initial thousands and thousands of blocks. But of course, there's a trusted element there as well. But you have to remember, you've already trusted the maker of the cell phone wallet or the maker of an SPV client on your computer, because you're installing their software. And this is the beauty of how every block, the proof of work of one block, builds on the proof of work of the previous block, which builds on the proof of work of the previous block, because they're all connected. And you cannot change that that sequence. You cannot go and insert a block somewhere. It's either you have to cut the chain and make new blocks. You cannot go and insert an arbitrary block in the middle of blocks. All you can do is just delete blocks at the tip and add new ones to the tip. You know, that's what happens with a reorg. So excuse me. So yeah, your software can be a lot quicker to sync up to the network just by having this trusted data already preloaded into the software of the block headers that, you know, are known to be safe. And anybody can go and verify this stuff. This is a nice thing. Once your node is synced up, even with just block headers, even though there's no easy way to see if you're running a GUI version of Bitcoin, if you connect with RPC, which is a way of connecting to your Bitcoin server, your Bitcoin node server, to communicate with it and ask it things, even once, because if you watch when it syncs, especially with the GUI version, you'll see that the bar basically does it twice. It does it once doing the block headers, and then it goes back and starts doing it again. So what happens is you can go, just by having the block headers, you can go and look at the latest block header just by looking at the hash. But it will tell you the number as well, but the number really doesn't matter, because you can find out what number it is just by looking at the hash. So copy the hash, go to what's on chain, go to SV blocks, go to block chair, go to a few different block explorers, you know, just in case, you know, one could be having problems, one could be attacked. It'd be very, you know, go to a few block explorers, especially if this is your initial sync, and go and paste in that block hash. Is that really the latest block? What block number is it? It will tell you. Go to CoinDance. Is that the latest? Is that block number correspond with it? Yes, it does. Is it the same block hash? Yes, it is. You know, it's all about just ensuring, just, you know, with your own eyes, that you are synced up with the latest block number. And if you know you've done that, then you know that your node now has connected and has a list of good nodes. So even if, unless somebody totally blacked out your connection and did some really crappy shit to you, there's no way that they could sybil you and pretend that they were the real network. And it's very expensive to do, because if they do it from the initial syncing, this is also why they have these checksums, by the way. But if you turn them off, And during the initial syncing, if somehow you managed to confuse, you hacked the person's router or whatever, you made it somehow so that your node was the initial node that they connected to, you're Mr. Bad Hacker, the difficulty level back then was really easy. So you could make quite a lot of blocks, total trash, linking from the Genesis block. Now, you ain't going to be able to make the number of blocks that we have now, because the difficulty level is going to keep increasing. It's going to be too hard. It's going to be as expensive as it's being for every miner to make blocks. But you know, if the person wasn't aware, or the person was asleep at the wheel, then you could, in theory, make say 1,000 blocks. So their chain would sync to 1,000. But then there's also timestamp issues. But you know, it removes basically the way of doing these attacks anyway, because the real attack that they could do now, of course, is put enough mining power to make a new block using the difficulty level now, forking off from a block a few blocks ago. But that's going to cost a lot of money, and you're not going to be able to get to many people because you would bypass them. Because eventually, the honest miners will be building the longest chain, the longest, most accumulated proof of work, and everybody will be sharing this as the latest block, all decentralized, all without trust. All you're trusting in is proof of work, and additionally, after your initial sync, or if you've turned your node off for a few weeks, maybe you've not kept it running, you've gone and looked at a block explorer or a few block explorers, or you could have called a friend who runs a node, you know, whatever. Go and ask in a channel if you're really paranoid, you know, hey, can someone confirm what block number we're on and what hash is? That's all you need to know. Ignore all the crapper from BTC about, you know, you need to run a node to be able to validate every transaction. No. What you need to do, and what will be happening, I imagine, on Bitcoin is everybody will be running nodes, but not nodes like the Blockstream boys do. People will be running SPV nodes, which we'll call them, light nodes, mini nodes, cell phone nodes, which maybe you won't even share data with other nodes, but you will connect to nodes which are only connected to mining nodes. You probably won't connect directly to the mining nodes. You might do, which you'll use for SPV. So I just want to move quickly on to fees, because we're nearly to an hour now, so I think I should cut off at an hour. So I see if I can explain fees in 7 minutes, which might be hard because I do take long explaining things, but I like to explain everything clearly, or as clearly as I can. So yeah, fees. What happens with fees? Well, right now what happens is basically nodes have two parameters. They have the, which is set in their configuration file. They have the minimum satoshis per byte that they're willing to accept into their mempool, and also the minimum satoshis per byte that they're willing to propagate to other miners. So you can have a transaction come in, and you can connect to a node that accepts to its mempool, and that even propagates transactions with really low fees. But that's probably that's probably a non-mining node. So you send your transaction, because of bad luck or whatever, you've connected to that node and done it. That node then tries to propagate, it accepts that node in its mempool, because remember, every node has its own mempool. There is no global mempool, which is another thing we need to speak about, but anyway. And then that node tries to propagate your transaction, because maybe it's set to propagate transactions, and no other node accepts it, because they say, no, these fees are too low, we're not accepting that. So your transaction never gets to a miner. The only mempools that really matter are the miners' mempools. That's why Craig probably has such a hatred for non-mining nodes. You see him speak about non-mining nodes don't matter and all this stuff, because they get in the way of the user and the miner. They get in the way of the client and the service. shall we say. Now, fees. It's already in the protocol that people speak about, oh, the lowest fee is 1 Satoshi a byte. It's not, because fees are whatever's left between the difference between the input and the output of transactions, which probably deserves a whole nother segment. But anyway, with diagrams, it'd probably be more helpful. So just how many sats per byte really is a human B Corp thing invented just to measure sats by bytes. But transaction fee, you could pay if a miner accepts it, you could pay nothing, but that generally doesn't happen as spam prevention. So if you could pay 1 Satoshi to upload 100 megabytes of data. Sorry, no, 1 Satoshi to upload 300 kilobytes of data, which would fit inside one transaction, if a miner accepted it. Or if you was a miner, you could make your own transaction paying 0 fees to upload 300 kilobytes in an octet time, as long as your block propagated, as long as you eventually got it in a block that you won. That would be what would happen. That would be on the blockchain. So what we need to have, remember, this can all be done without changing the set in stone protocol. We need to be able to have a way for a wallet, an SPV wallet, because that's the most simplest form of wallet and the most simplest form of node, to be able to connect two nodes and first find out, is this a mining node, or is this a node that that a miner controls, which to all intents and purposes you could see it as the same as a mining node, for reasons of distribution, for reasons of not having everybody connecting to his real actual node that's connected to his ASICs. He might have a few nodes in the same building, all connected to each other, but he only dedicates his real actual ASIC connecting node to connect to other actual miners, just so he can keep his number of connections as small as possible and receive those blocks and send his blocks and receive those transactions and send his transactions as quickly as possible. But what you can do is, we might have had a thing called miner ID, which is basically, don't fall for it as some sort of certification for miners, and unless Calvin and Craig sign a piece of paper, you can't mine. No. At its most basic level, it really is a public-private key, just like a Bitcoin address, but one that is not associated directly with money. It's associated with proof of work. Every block that you make, you sign it with this key saying, I made this block, and you're just an anonymous ID, unless you want to reveal who you are, but you've got a key there. So what that means is, when somebody connects to you, the first thing, maybe it's part of the version messages, or maybe there'll be a new message, miner info or something, and it will say, this is who I am. This is my public key. This is my miner ID. These are my fees. Now, the miner ID, you can go and see. Well, your client can go and see, and imagine it's got a node list that it keeps updated. It can have more information about each node. So the first thing you can go see, well, who is this miner? And how much has he contributed to the network in, say, the last 2 months? Because you won't want to look at all of the history, because a miner could be new, and you don't want to look at just the last block either, because a miner could be, by chance he could have done the last block, so you would get a false idea. But maybe the last 2 months, the last month, I don't know, some sort of time span. You could look at every single block made in the last month and what miner IDs were responsible for each block. So then you get an idea, roughly, of how much percentage of hash power does this miner represent in the network during the last month. So that would be immediately how you would know, are you connected to a guy who can actually make blocks? How many blocks is he expected to make in the next 24 hours? And also, of course, what the miner can do is publish fees. Now, these fees won't be bytes, satoshis per byte. They will be, of course, for a normal common transaction. And there might be a few different levels. There might be satoshis per byte to next block I mine. So the next block he mines, he's guaranteeing you a position for your P2P cash, normal cash transaction within the next block he mines for 2 satoshis a byte. Or No guarantees, but you should be in within the next 24 hours for 1 Satoshi a byte. So you can think about it, if you're paying an electricity bill, you're paying something that, you know, takes a day or two, you don't really care. You know, of course, these fees could be 0.1 and 0.2 Satoshis a byte, probably more likely to be that, especially as the price increases and we get more transactions in each block. But this is just a simple example. You know, you could say, oh, no, well, my electricity, and your client software could handle all of this. You know, you wouldn't be seeing Satoshis per byte, you'd be having fee levels, you know, low, medium, high. But it wouldn't be like you have on BTC where the fee market is you trying to get ahead of other people, paying more to get into the next block because you limit on block space. No, it really would be just miners competing with each other for the lowest fees. So it works in your favor. You're only going to get lower fees using this method. So obviously the miner wants to, every miner is going to have their own limit to how big a blocks they're going to make. Right now we've seen 256 megabyte blocks. So he's got to give up some of his block space if he's guaranteeing you his next block, but you've got to give up a few more sats to get into his next block maybe. If it's urgent, your payment, you know, if you're at the supermarket, it's an urgent payment, you need to make it. So you don't stand around like an idiot waiting for your payment. But anyway, that would be a zero comp, so that would be something else. But you know, and also that relates to minor ID, and that relates to the P2P protocol as well. But that's a whole nother area. But you know, just imagining it's an urgent payment because you've sold some Bitcoin to somebody, or you've sold a car. You want to see it confirmed on the blockchain. You want to see free confirmation. So the sooner the block it gets in, the quicker you can drive away with the car after, say, I don't know, 3 block confirmations, which should be half an hour. So you want to get in the next block. So, you know, you pay 2 sats a byte. You pay your electricity bill. You don't care if they get it today, tomorrow. They're not going to cut your electricity. So you pay 1 sat a byte, the lowest fee. And the miner puts it in a block whenever he can within a certain window. You know, you can probably rate your transaction experience based on, did that happen, share it with others maybe, and miners can have reputations from people proven on the blockchain, proven not by virtue signaling, saying, you know, this miner did this, or like writing a crappy review in Google reviews, because it'd be backed up by data, it'd be backed up by people knowing what the miner said he would do for that fee, seeing what you paid for him to do that, and did he fulfill that obligation or not. If he didn't, people will see that, and I'm sure there will be stuff like that happening. And obviously your node software could then have a thing connected with miners that are either unknown or have good ratings. So that encourages fair miners, that encourages fair business. But further than that, you've also got to think about all these op returns, op push datas, all these data blasts, all these other things. All these people are concerned about pruning nodes and about you know, how long we'll be able to access data, how much does it cost, and why is it expensive to upload a video, and how can this work, and all this stuff. Well, this is where you get into the next stage, where you're shown your client receives fees for all sorts of things. Video uploads, maybe it says video upload. 5 sats, upload any length video you want as an op return for 5 sats. But to download it, you're going to need to pay this amount of sats. Or, to guarantee when it's not going to be pruned, you're going to need to send a certain amount of sats to this address every 24 hours or every month. So that way you would have a market where somebody who wants to have a video, you know, why should somebody who wants to have something on the blockchain for eternity pay the same as somebody who wants to have something on the blockchain for just 1 year? You know, or maybe 10 years or 20 years are better examples, where if you think about company accounts, company records, the legal requirement I think is 10 years for some things, or 20 years for other things, maybe 30 years, 40 years for mortgage and stuff like that. You know, that would be how much they're willing to spend they want it for 40 years. So there could be other ways where they could pay now for 40 years, or they simply keep recharging it, like keep paying a thing to say, hey, don't prune this, here's my money, keep it there. And there will be ways of checking that they are not pruning it, ways of checking without having to download it all that your data is there still there, at least with that one miner. I mean, of course, you could do the same thing with 2 or 3 miners just to be sure. Again, all this technical stuff, it really is going to be simple buttons, simple UXs, and simple choices that your wallet software will make. You won't have to think about this. You won't have to know exactly what's going on, that it's communicating over a Bitcoin P2P protocol with miners and doing this stuff. You won't care about this. You'll just see prices and numbers and easy selections like quick, slow, high priority, long-term storage, short-term storage, medium-term storage, permanent forever storage, and your client, your UX will guide you through it all. And it will obviously get better all the time. But you can also have like, as part of the transaction fees, the miners advertising. So what happens is every single miner, every single node that you connect to, you're getting all these TX fees now. You're seeing which ones are nodes actually ran by miners and which ones are not. So then you start to see which nodes are worth connecting to, and you can actually go and say to your software, I want to send this transaction. I'm happy for it to take a week to send it, because I don't care if it takes a week. All I care about is the cheapest rate. Bang. And what it will do is it will go and find out which miner. Maybe it's a miner who mines just 1 block a month because he hasn't got a lot of ASIC equipment. Maybe he's a new miner. Maybe he's a miner in a small country. Maybe it's just a small little cooperative mining company. So that to compete, they might think, well, lads, with the ASICs that we've got, we can only manage to mine 1 block a month. But we're going to take the risk and try and get a terameg block out there. When we do mine that block, we want it to be a terameg. So they might spend all that time building these blocks with these cheaper transactions fees, slightly cheaper than everybody else, so that they really do have a terameg of data in their block to send out. And of course, if they keep doing this, taking all these transactions because they're competing and they're making money doing it, then they might eventually become a bigger miner. Or they might stay a small miner because that's their business model. It all depends exactly what they want to do. But the important part is your software, from being a dumb thing that connects to anywhere, that trustlessly, it can now still trustlessly, because you're basing all that you can see on proof of work, proof of work history, if you like, or the history of proof of work, stuff that you've seen the miners do. You've seen which are the miners in the network, which are the really big players, and all these miners can also see each other, and fees probably will chop and change regularly, especially as the price goes up. You can imagine the fees in Satoshi's dropping, because otherwise, especially while the miner's still paying his electricity and his expenses in fiat, the miner's earning more, getting more in fees in fiat because the price is rising. So that's not fair. The price drops, you can see the fees go up. But eventually, if we become world money and fiat doesn't exist anymore, or fiat becomes just a token on our blockchain, the fees, you can imagine they'll be pretty static, but they'll always be on a downward slope, because miners will simply start competing more. And costs for miners, for storage, for network and stuff, will only go down per byte. So the fees will just get competitive, and a new player might come in, heavily financed, offering great fees just to try and get his positions solidified in the market. Somebody might be, so all this fee market thing, which is a fee market in our favour, not like the mempool fee market on BTC, would only mean more competition between miners. Like think of Weather SV, they're having to use, we call it a side channel method, I believe, of sending to, I think it's mempool, their WebOSV transactions, which mempool then puts in a block for 0.90, no, yeah, 0.2, that's a fifth of a Satoshi per byte. And mempool otherwise, to do this, would be paying 1 Satoshi per byte. So it's 20% of the price. So it's quite a substantial saving for them. It means you could do 5 times more transactions, in essence. If there was a way that, so they have to do it by a side channel, and it's kind of like, I imagine, a manual, semi-scripted process they've got running now. It's not the most efficient, but the only reason they have to do this is because we haven't got this free market thing working yet. Imagine that whether SV would be looking, saying, you know, maybe they can find a way of advertising. Maybe there would be a service where you could write a message to the block saying, hey miners, I want to pay this for this. Come and get in touch with me. You know, and there will be a way that that miners could see that message and say, okay, well, right, okay, then yeah, I'm going to accept that, and they'll set up an offer in their fees. Yeah, we'll take a transaction from WebOSV, 0.2 sats a byte, or 0.19 sats, maybe, because they want to compete with the guys who are doing 0.2, and Weber might go with the 0.19 guys, and then somebody else might say 0.18, and how low do they go? It can only benefit WebOSV, and it can only benefit the WebOSV people, and this can all happen pretty transparently. Because in effect, WebOSV could set a setting in their software saying, I'm happy to pay less than 0.2 sats a byte or less, but I'm happy to wait an hour. Each time I want to send a transaction, I'm happy to wait an hour just to see who offers me the lowest fee. You know, so the software can sit there and automatically enter into bartering, enter into an auctioning thing just to get the lowest fee that it can. And of course, the miner is always going to be trying to get the highest fee, and the user is always going to be trying to pay the lowest fee. But the miners realise they have to compete with the other miners. So it really is a dynamic, fair market. So the prices can only reach the bottom. And that's how it will work. And that is part of the massive changes that will be coming, I imagine, to the Bitcoin P2P protocol. Okay, there's a hell of a lot of things left unsaid. I think we need to speak about Terranode, how that changes the Bitcoin P2P protocol, and so many other things. But I can only leave it for another episode. This was, as I said, episode 69 of the Jimmy N. Lewis Show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. Sorry if I've taken too long to explain things, but I think it's better to explain them thoroughly than to just give a quick explanation. So yeah, donations please, Jimmy N. Lewis at moneybutton.com. And yeah, I'll be coming out of a new show soon, explaining a lot more of the Bitcoin P2P protocol, and then moving on to other things so that other people can learn in the space. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.